Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Jeff Mitchell. I believe leaders must be anticipatory to chart a path forward. We can either be proactive and move forward, or sit back and be reactive and risk falling behind. Wayfinders lead. The NCAA Pathway Program is designed to incubate and inspire the next generation of executives in our profession. I am grateful for my pathway experience and encourage others to explore their own opportunity in the NCAA Pathway Program.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Earlston Bean Jr. Earlston is the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Events and Safety Management at Indiana University. Greetings, Earlston. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, greetings, Ty, and thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. You've been at Indiana for almost 12 years now. You also spent time at Michigan State. You did some intern work at FAU, and you also interned at Augusta. I think you've been in the industry for almost 20 years, which is a wealth of experience. And I am happy to have you on the show. And so the question I have for you to start us off, right? Senior Associate Athletics Director for Events and Safety Management. That is a job that probably involves a lot of detail, a lot of risk management, knowing everybody on campus. I wonder if you could give us kind of what do you do in that role? What does that entail?
So what that entails, a team of us oversee our logistics operations for 24 varsity sports. Obviously, everything from the game ops, event management, the safety security initiatives of that, working with our security vendors as well, liaison to our campus affiliates such as emergency management, IUPD, which is our Indiana University Police Department, the president's office at times as it relates to athletic events. And that's just to name a few. Also, anything that relates to the safety and security of our student athletes, I have a hand in as well. I was part of our COVID ops team as well. So
there's some aspects of that take a good, healthy either relationship or healthy communication between, like school has their own risk management, right? The campus is going to have its own risk manager, its own, basically somebody in a similar position that you're in. And when you talk about a game, a competition, or you talk about anything where somebody could possibly be injured or something could go tremendously wrong or tremendously right, tell me about the relationship with your equivalent on campus and how you guys work towards doing things to make athletics, operate at a high level. And then do you ever work with them for things that happen on campus that don't have to do with athletics?
It depends. Obviously, so our risk management department is called NLOC, pretty much it's safety, security elements. We work with them as it relates to what technically how it flows is I work with our third-party vendor, which is still on campus, what we call event services as it relates to running our athletic events. And then us collectively work with NLOC, our department, which is a risk management as it relates to the safety elements. If we have an incident and a report is filed, obviously we're communicating with those individuals to ensure we go about it the right way, and then they will move it up the chain or what have you if it's a need or they contact the individuals or group of individuals that may be filing a complaint or what have you. So that's how it technically works, and we have a very, very close relationship. So we're in constant communication with them. Obviously, you have to have, each campus is insured depending on what we're self-insured. So if we host an NCAA tournament or championship on campus, we obviously go through them to make sure we have the proper insurances in place to give to the NCAA to let them know that, hey, we're capable of running your event here and covered and things of that nature. So
yeah, I imagine there are, and just you're educating me here, right? This is not an area I have any type of familiarity with, but are there policies that are set by, I guess you call it NLOC, it's set by that on-campus entity that everybody who is involved with the type of work you're doing follows? And then are there policies that each individual arm sets on its own that may vary a little bit from from that?
So pretty much we would mirror what emergency management and Interlock would have in place for our events and make sure that anything that we want to ensure or go about, we obviously sometimes general counsel is involved. So it's obviously a lot of elements that we want to make sure that we're doing everything appropriately, that we get the sign off from risk management or Interlock and general counsel. So we're working with all those various entities on policies that may have already that are in place and are not that we may have internally that fits the mold what they want or what we need in that element.
Yeah, which is excellent. Do you think in terms of people, is the a risk management, safety, and event management, are there certain type of people who gravitate towards this kind of job? Like, tell me about that aspect.
Yes and no. People think, I mean, you have to have this strict, detailed, which you do. A lot of it's detail driven, and obviously your checks and balances are following up, and you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So you do want to have that aspect of it. But to your point, some people can have this laser focus, tunnel vision, and not necessarily see or work outside of that vision to collectively or collaborate. But yeah, and I get it. But it can be what people may refer to as like policy or driven, which is what's on paper needs to go and no flexibility. Well, I like to take a different approach to that, like to be more collaborative and work with people, let people do their jobs.
Yeah.
So
as opposed to this is the way it is and your input doesn't matter because we set the policy and this is how it's going to go, right? Yeah, that's interesting. When you talk about people, I mean, you do have to have a team around you, right? To help make sure, because you can't be everywhere doing everything, especially when you talk about event management and safety. How big is the team that works with you? Like, how many people do you hire? Is there like you have full timers and you may have some third party people? Like, tell me about that whole aspect of yours.
So we're unique in the situation where I like to say we are fortunate than some other institutions. We are able to have an on-campus entity, which is our event services element. That yes, we pay for that service. However, they're on campus. They also service other areas on campus, so we're able to utilize them. They provide, we help them in what ways we can, obviously. So it's a great working and partnership with that team, which also in turn, they're able to hire subcontract our security vendors. And so I work with them on whatever is policies, training, things of that nature that we want to see fit within athletics from an athletics point of view or perspective. So that's our element. So some institutions aren't, I would like to say they have their own situation or go about doing it, and they may do it internally. It's kind of internally, but it's not in a sense. It's internally from a university perspective, but not necessarily from that. It sits in-house in athletics.
And then what about a team within a department? Do you have like your own staff?
Yes, so I have a staff, and we obviously collaborate on a number of elements, even outside of our events per se. But also in this area, you're working with so many other elements like marketing, facilities. So sometimes we have to be the bad guy and like, hey, marketing, unfortunately, we can't go about it this way. However, let's look at something else. Sometimes I always get referred to as the no fun police.
Hilarious.
But obviously trying to protect them and fans and things of such, we have to, can't always grant certain things that ones may want. But yeah, to answer your question, definitely working with a team of folks. So that's how I view it, because it's not necessarily my way or this way, but it's a collective element, working with all of our entities, because it does take all of certain departments on campus as well as internally to successfully pull off events, championships, or what have you.
Whatever they need to be, right? Yeah. And they probably pout a little bit when you tell them that we can't do it that way, but I'm sure you either offer alternatives or in the end they think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
It probably would have
been. So one thing I like to do is I approach that as, okay, either you or I or your team, my team, what have you, if we can't do it this way, let's get a list of comparables or what have you. Let's find more other solutions per se. to go about it. And because the last thing I like to do definitely is I hate saying no.
Right.
I mean, you always want to, and that's everything, you regardless of what the situation may be, I like to try to find something that we can come to an agreement or a common ground.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. In terms of the personnel within the department that work with you, you think about leadership, right? Of course, 1Q leadership podcast, where I'm always going to veer the conversation towards leadership. But you think about leadership. One of the things when you get into a role where you have a bunch of responsibilities, and then you have people reporting to who have their own responsibilities, is you have to manage the personnel, right? People come, people leave, good reasons, bad reasons. If you've had to hire and fire, for the lack of a better word, it's all just a part of that leadership, right? As you gain more responsibilities, managing and leading people. And I wonder about your philosophy on identifying, hiring, and leading the type of people who you feel like would be successful, either just in college athletics in general, or specifically in some of the roles and responsibilities that you have there when you talk about safety and event management.
Yeah. So, I mean, how I approach that is I believe in giving people a chance. I mean, getting to know the person. Sometimes the jobs require to have astronomical amounts of experience. Well, sometimes, emphasis on sometimes, applicants with the least amount of experience are your most driven individuals.
Okay.
Not saying that we go with that route the entire time, but just knowing that those individuals, getting to know them and and knowing their goals, what they want to do. Because once you know what they get to know the person and knowing their goals, and how can those goals fit within your framework or blueprint to make you not only the position successful, but the person successful as well. And so that they're growing within their role and not necessarily seem that they're hitting a ceiling. Because one thing I like to do is definitely allow people to grow within their role and evolve, and take on obviously additional responsibilities or what have you. So that each year, obviously constantly thinking of, and not even each year, but literally constantly thinking of ways to enhance, like they say, the student athlete experience. Well, I like to enhance the employee experience in some aspects. So what ways can we do, financially, fiscally responsible or what have you, in other tasks, and letting them thrive within that task, and obviously owning their craft and developing in that element.
How do you, somebody may come in, especially like you mentioned, somebody that doesn't have a whole lot of experience actually are pretty motivated to get in and get experience doing something and being good at doing something. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you want to make working for you. This is my interpretation, right? Using my words, that's probably what you said. You want to make working for you more than just another paycheck, right? So they actually want to work for you because they get more than just the work they're doing and more than just pay for their time.
Absolutely.
How do you identify somebody who comes in and thinks they want to do something and may not be able to articulate the goals they want to accomplish, but you feel like this person has something to them, and you bring them in and help them actually figure out what they want to do?
Yeah, and great question, Tai. I mean, you look at what if a person, it's one thing that you identify your strengths are as a person, but I can also see, and you can see probably, being with me for a while, you could possibly say, hey, well, his strengths may be this or that, or can gravitate. What's your assumption? And then you go back with that person, and then you build a blueprint or a game plan to say, hey, let me know what you think about this. I'm seeing that your strengths are this. And we want to hone in on your strengths, because I think that's what people end up, when people know or can identify their strengths, let's work with it.
Right.
Let's continue to grow that and grow and use those to enhance your experience, or enhance your elements that you want to, or your goals that you may want to achieve, and then we can get to that. So once we identify that marker, then it can be easy flowing
for them to move up. And I'm sure you've had people who have come in and moved on to positions where they are on their way.
Absolutely. And that's one thing. And obviously, just that constant communication, that openness, that saying, hey, what is it that you want to do? And I truly believe in, when you care about the person genuinely, that everything else will follow.
I wonder, one aspect of leadership is having tough conversations, right? And without going into any detail about any specific conversation, tell me about your approach to sitting down and talking with somebody and saying, hey, look, these things aren't living up to code and what we just discussed as our expectations for you, or do you feel like you're doing the best? Or or it's even like anytime you hear a boss says something like "help me understand," it means that it's going to be a tough conversation. So like,
that can be, yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that. The tough conversations you may have to have in
Tough
leadership roles.
it obviously this stuff doesn't generate out of thin air.
Yeah.
It's coming from something. If an individual or employee is not meeting certain expectations, I think it's where you bring in that open dialogue. Yes, I've had tough conversations and had to say, hey, this is a list of elements, a list of things, I should say, that has been brought to my attention. Now, one thing you definitely want to do is get their opinion. And I say, like I always learn this, you never know what someone's coming to work with. So you can't say this performance is lacking because it just is. So I like to try to get to the root of things. Like, let's get mano one-on-one. Like, let's be real. Like, is something in your personal life? What's going on? Do you need to take some time? So that's how I take it, because you never want to go in something saying, oh, it's their fault, or you point a finger at them, because then they don't feel like they have their back. And that's what the last thing you don't want. You always want to be supportive, but yet be firm but fair. So that's how I would approach it, or have approached it if I had to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Just that openness and dialogue, and going through that list of things that have not been met
or lived up to it. And what's interesting is open dialogue was something you said on both sides, right? You bring somebody in and their strengths and what they want to do, and you have an open dialogue and help them find out what they want to do and possibly help them get there, even if that means leaving working for you. But then also in a tough conversation, open dialogue is the same. Like, the open dialogue is the habit of people of working with you, right? One of your organizational habits, and then people having those conversations. And the thing you said there was, you never know what someone is coming to work with.
You never know what someone's bringing to work. You never know what they're bringing to work.
Never know what they're bringing. I think
what they're bringing to work. They could potentially bring into work.
That's significant, right? It's even people talk about try to stay away from road rage, because that other person in the car, it may be something really going on that you don't want to unleash on you when you're out there yelling at people as you cut them off or they cut you off or something like that, right?
So always start with, just, hey, what they're willing to share.
Yeah.
Because I need to say, definitely no mental health expert, but obviously just genuinely want to have that openness and know that they're cared about genuinely.
Yeah, which is important. So when you talk about that aspect of relationships, never knowing what somebody bringing to work, there's also the aspect of not just people who report to you or people you work with, but as a leader, if you're not at the top of the food chain, then you're also helping the person who is at the top of the food chain to be successful.
Absolutely.
Right? And so one key aspect of leading is serving, right? Either those that report to you or the people you report to. So I wonder how you, like, some of the ways that you help. I think you report to the deputy AD there. And then, of course, there's also the athletic director, who everyone reports to. So how do you help them to be successful at what they do in their leadership roles at Indiana?
So the way I approach this, Tai, let's say figurative, metaphorically speaking, I look at a department, or my department, or just the department as a whole, as a tree.
Okay.
And this tree has been here before me. That tree is going to be here after me. So my responsibility is to continue to grow that tree. And how do you grow that tree? Is obviously watering or guarding the roots. And when I look at, not directly saying employees are roots, but yet I look at them as, in order for this tree to grow, you have to generally, and I hate to repeat myself on this, but it goes back to really getting to know those individuals, getting to know their goals, getting to know what it is that they want out of their roles, and how and letting them know with action, or listening to them and letting them know that they're valued. So it's really goes back to that, because I truly believe once you hone in on the employee as a person, everything else has followed. So that's just my blueprint of how I've approached things, and humbly speaking, it has worked for me thus far, where employees can flourish in their roles. So once they're flourishing, or once they know that they're appreciated or cared for as a person, the employee, it's like free flowing. Like they've been able to blossom and been open and communicate and collaborate. You fit within, you know where you are within the team, and when you excel, the team excels. Right. So when you develop that mindset, that's, in my opinion, so once that is taken care of, the AD or the deputy AD, when they know that's going on, they have no reason to look this way. They're, oh, well, that's just one less thing on our plate. So that area or folks know they're being attended to or taken care of.
Yeah. So the way you serve them well is making sure that the people who work with you specifically are served well too, right? Servant leadership, yes. Through servant leadership. Sounds like, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's excellent.
Absolutely.
I think that's excellent. I wonder, this question, it's along the same lines, but it's off a little bit. But when you talk about evaluation, some leaders like to be constantly evaluated, right? Don't just wait to evaluate me once a year, because
you're right.
So many things may have changed over the years. So I wonder about discussions like with the deputy in terms of, well, we had to make these kind of changes. Like, do you guys meet monthly, weekly? Like, how often do you?
So yes, and one thing I love about our deputy AD, it's not necessarily the norm everywhere, but like if I want to go talk to our deputy AD, Stephen or Maddie, I can just knock on the door, go in, hey, got something to want to run by you. It's not like you have to go, and I do think like regular meetings are important, but also when you have that flexibility to just, so we're meeting like 3 or 4 times a week, because it's just, we gotta touch base on this. So we want to make sure something is going on in that element. So that's also something that, and it's not just me, like my employees or others, we have in my door as well, have that literally, not quote unquote open door policy. When people say they have an open door policy, no, we literally have it. Can I run this by you or whatever? Oh yeah, come on in.
Right.
Or hey, I'm on the phone, I'll come get you real quick.
So it's a constant conversation.
It's a constant conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's not just like my direct report, Stephen, our deputy, but also Maddie White, who's also our deputy.
Yeah. So I wonder about that. I'll ask one question here about that, and then I'll ask another question, and then we'll wrap. But event and safety management, or safety and event management, God forbid something happened, right? Mm-hmm. And it gets handled well.
Yeah, yes.
Like, when do you involve, like, what's the first call? Do you talk to campus first, or do you involve the AD immediately? Like, tell me about that aspect.
No, it just depends on the situation. So if 9 times out of 10, the AD or deputy is going to be there automatically if it's depending on, and regardless of the sporting event. So it's just the nature of the situation. So obviously, if I'm not there, I teach my staff to, you don't have to directly make sure I'm aware first, but obviously handle this situation the best you can, or train, because you never can be, there's so many scenarios that can pop up. But obviously, depending on it, you want to make sure emergency management, law enforcement are known as well. If we get to in-lock, obviously we want to make sure, and in-lock doesn't necessarily always work on the weekend. So if something happens on the weekend, the chain of command definitely will come to me, and I can call our deputy or our AD, and then we'll go from there. Or unfortunately, situations where IUPD has had to call me, and then I've called our deputy AD, and then I've called our AD on a particular situation. So does that kind of help answer the question?
I think the key there is making sure everybody that works with you and on your direct team has some semblance of discernment between the level of a situation, and then the chain of command is probably laid out in certain situations. But sometimes you got to make sure the situation is handled first, right?
Exactly. Just make sure the situation is handled first, the best of your ability.
Yeah. All right, I'll ask this last question, then we'll wrap. It's specifically about your own development, right? You think about people who are coaches, who work in athletics, or really any industry, somebody who is motivated to continually improve and make themselves better tomorrow than they are today. You're always trying to move up in the world. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I wonder about your methods for sharpening yourself for potential leadership opportunity. Like, what do you do to get better? Basically?
Well, I think you got to volunteer, put yourself out there. Okay. You got to make yourself get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, honing your skills, whatever that may be. For example, I like to volunteer with conference initiatives, where there's the Big Ten football tournament or men's basketball or what have you. Putting yourself out there, getting in that world, it has helped. I mean, you meet so many different people. You're able to interact with pretty much all the athletic directors at the men's basketball tournament, and then whoever during the football champ game. But putting yourself out there in that element, obviously doing things of this, I appreciate you, so honing on developing this skill of podcasts, doing public speaking, what have you, those elements are getting more out there, that can just help you as just your skills, yet will also help you develop in a leader as well.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
And then volunteer for anything, or, hey, if we're in a senior staff meeting, hey, raise your hand, like, hey, for a task, that helps you get more experience outside of your day-to-day realm, or help another senior staff member with a project or what have you. Yeah. So volunteer, like, hey, you need some help with that?
I think that's excellent. Volunteering, outside of your actual place of business, volunteering outside of the role that you actually do. Mm-hmm. And then also, I imagine, based on our discussions, there's a leadership aspect to it too, right? The practicing leadership with your staff, and trying to make sure that they are able to do the things that are necessary to make their role successful, which helps you to be successful, and which helps the deputy and the AD and the whole universe, right? It grows that tree, like you mentioned.
Tree, right? Grows that tree, baby.
Excellent. Well, Earlston, this has been an excellent conversation. I learned a little bit about that safety and event management, and I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Tai. I really appreciate you and what you're doing.
Yes, sir. That was Earlston Bean, Jr. He's a Senior Associate Athletics Director for Events and Safety Management at Indiana University. And of course, this is Tai Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.